Hey, what's up, everybody? Today we're looking at the winner of the Royal Society Science Book Prize, A Very Short History of Life on Earth, 4.6 billion years in 12 pithy chapters by Henry G. Henry G is a paleontologist slash evolutionary biologist and the author of a number of books such as In Search of Deep Time, Across the Bridge, Understanding the Origin of the Vertebrates, and Jacob's Ladder, The History of the Human Genome. Henry G is also a senior editor for the science journal Nature. So when you've conducted your research and you submit your paper to the journal Nature, he's one of the people in charge of evaluating your work. This book covers life on Earth chronologically, starting with the birth of our sun and spanning the entire history of life on the planet until now, and he even goes a billion years into the future. Life wasn't always as complex as what we see today. Things started out very simple. We still can't say for certain exactly how life got started, but we see the first organisms, the first eukaryotic cells, and things continue to complexify into larger, more advanced organisms with increasing mobility and agency. We see life branch off into the different domains and domains into kingdoms and kingdoms into phyla and so on. Many of the most important evolutionary achievements are in this book, like the beginning of the vertebrates, egg laying, and the first humans. All of the ever changing myriad forms of life evolving over a backdrop of a constantly changing Earth. And we find that it's the changing environments that are shaping the lives that occupy them. Here's some of the chapter names to give you an idea: Animals Assemble, The Backbone Begins, Triassic Park, Planet of the Apes, and The End of Prehistory. I loved this book. I was amazed at how many concepts G was able to cram into this book. So many of the things he talked about were things that come up in the kinds of books I reviewed on this channel, but there was also so much more. As editor of the journal Nature, a huge portion of the notes and the further reading from this book come from the journal Nature, and a good portion of them also come from books I reviewed on this channel. And I really enjoyed learning more and revisiting these concepts. Of course, G has his own style, which I would describe as very informative and totally casual while capturing the wonder of nature or the wonder of life. But parts of this book did remind me of some other books I've read. It's like part Wonderful Life by Stephen Jay Gould, part A Life on This Planet by David Attenborough, and part When Life Nearly Died by Michael J. Benton. And yes, extinction is a very important part of the history of life on Earth, and the author spends a good deal of time talking about it. Another important theme in this book is the coming together of different forms of life to form new forms of life. And there's some really interesting stuff on that in here. This book was written to be accessible by anybody. You don't need to have any training in science to enjoy it, but you'll probably like it more if you do. The book would be perfect for someone who hasn't really studied this topic yet, but would like to have a broad overview of the different concepts of animals doing their business in the living world. It's very beginner friendly, but this book can throw a lot of information at you, especially with the chapter on the Triassic period. I found myself stopping and looking up the animals that he was talking about over and over. This part of the book covers some stuff that the author has more experience with, so he'll be introducing like 2 or 3 new animals per paragraph, and it's a lot to keep up with. But it's really fascinating because he's not just listing off a bunch of creatures, but referencing them in connection with different adaptations and ways of living that are evolving along with the changes that are happening in the environment that he's describing. And that's really the main thing this book does. He talks about why environmental and climatic changes are happening throughout time and life's adaptive responses to those changes. This is the stuff of why so many people study biology, and G has captured that and stuck it between the covers of this book perfectly. I felt that his writing style was very approachable and engaging. He did a lot of things I appreciate, like ending a chapter by leading into the next one, or He'll reference something in familiar context to help illustrate the meaning of his point. He also has a good sense of humor, which I appreciate. And when you're dealing with material that's very information heavy, you have to make sure that it's interesting enough that the reader doesn't lose interest. And I definitely didn't. I really enjoyed the actual act of reading this book. Another thing that made me love this book was the sense of scale that the author accomplishes. I feel that sometimes a really good science book, especially one that deals in large scales, can take you out of the anthropocentric viewpoint and help you to see things from just a natural, things as they actually are viewpoint. Being a creature that lives for 70 or 80 years and having a book that deals in time spans that exceed the entire time of life on Earth presents opportunities for an author that can either be very enriching or a lost opportunity, and I think that G handled this very well. There are some books that when you finish them, you think, man, I'm glad I read that, and I got that with this book. The only way I could see somebody not liking this book is if they already know all the information in it, but even having just read it, I wouldn't mind going through it again. A Very Short History of Life on Earth was the first book I've read by Henry G, and after reading this, I'll be wanting to read some more of his work. Okay, that's it for this one, guys. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. So many incredible and important events have taken place throughout the history of evolution of life on Earth. If you want to hear about some of them and what factors are involved in their inception, and maybe gain a greater appreciation of the biodiversity that we have today, definitely check out A Very Short History of Life on Earth by Henry G.